The federal judge's gavel hit 3 times. "Ms. Richardson, your testimony has been noted." 6 minutes later, that same judge would publicly apologize on live television. Federal Courthouse, Delaware. Corporate fraud hearing against Richardson Industries. Amara Richardson sits alone at the defendant's table, her navy blazer pressed, her posture straight, despite the weight of accusations crushing down around her. 3 witnesses had just testified. Former CFO Janet Mills described financial irregularities and unprofessional conduct. Ex-Vice President Derek Thompson claimed she was completely unqualified for the position. Whistleblower Sarah Chen painted Richardson as a screaming, document-throwing tyrant who destroyed company culture. The gallery packed with reporters and industry executives. Richardson remained silent, occasionally writing notes in a worn leather portfolio. This is one of those real-life stories that exposes how black stories often get buried under corporate bias. Have you ever watched someone get systematically destroyed, only to discover the destroyers were the real criminals? Judge Harold Brennan adjusts his glasses, his weathered face betraying decades of courtroom authority. At 62, he's presided over hundreds of corporate cases. Today feels different. The media attention, the whispered conversations, the way certain gallery members lean forward when Richardson moves. "Ms. Mills, please describe the defendant's management style," Prosecutor Amanda Walsh prompts. Janet Mills clutches a tissue, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite her tears. "She called me incompetent in front of the entire C-suite, screamed that I didn't understand basic accounting principles." Mills' voice wavers convincingly. 23 years of experience, and she humiliated me like a child. Richardson's pen stops moving. She glances up briefly, catches Mills' eye, then returns to her notes. "Did she ever display violent tendencies?" Walsh continues. "Objection? Leading," Richardson's attorney Sarah Chen interjects. "Sustained," Brennan rules, though his tone suggests reluctance. Mills adjusts her pearl necklace. "She threw documents across the conference table. Said our quarterly projections were garbage from incompetent white women who shouldn't be in finance." The gallery stirs. Phones emerge from purses and pockets. Richardson's expression doesn't change, but her knuckles whiten around her pen. Court reporter Margaret Singh struggles with Richardson's name pronunciation for the 3rd time. Richard. "Richardson," the defendant says quietly. Brennan doesn't acknowledge the correction. Security footage plays on the courtroom monitor. Richardson pointing during a heated board meeting, her mouth moving animatedly. Without audio, every gesture looks aggressive. 10 minutes until closing arguments," Brennan announces. Derek Thompson takes the witness stand next. Silver-haired, expensive suit. Harvard MBA confidence radiating from every gesture. Richardson Industries lost $50 million under her leadership. $50 million. He produces financial reports, slides them toward the prosecutor. "These documents show systematic mismanagement. Funds transferred to questionable overseas accounts. Basic fiduciary responsibilities ignored." Richardson pulls out her phone discreetly. 2 missed calls from Senator Williams. She slides it back into her portfolio next to a first-class boarding pass to Washington, D.C. "Mr. Thompson, did you ever witness the defendant engaging in questionable financial practices?" "Multiple times. She authorized wire transfers without board approval, created shell companies for consulting fees that never materialized into actual consulting." Thompson's voice carries the weight of moral authority. "She destroyed shareholder value through reckless decision-making." A business card falls from Richardson's portfolio onto the floor. Federal Reserve Board Advisory Committee, visible in gold lettering. She picks it up quickly, but not before the court reporter notices. Live Twitter feed scrolls on phones throughout the gallery. #Richardson, trial trending with increasingly ugly undertones. Another diversity hire fails upward. When will boards learn? Affirmative action strikes again. Sarah Chen, the whistleblower, approaches the stand. 34 precise movements, the demeanor of someone who's thought through every detail. Her testimony cuts deepest. I reported financial irregularities to the SEC 18 months ago. Richardson had been moving money to offshore accounts, claiming they were emergency operational funds. Chen's voice stays steady, professional. When I confronted her privately, she threatened my career, said no one would believe a junior accountant over a CEO. Richardson checks her watch. A limited edition Patek Philippe worth more than most people's cars. The subtle luxury seems incongruous with the poverty of character being described. 5 minutes to closing arguments, Brennan warns. Richardson's attorney whispers urgently in her ear. Richardson shakes her head slightly, writes something on a notepad, slides it toward her lawyer. The note reads, "Are we recording everything?" Her lawyer writes back, "Every word, Ms. Richardson. Every word." Mill's husband films discreetly from the gallery, his phone angled to capture Richardson's reactions. Industry executives tweet real-time updates. Local news reporter Jennifer Hayes goes live. Richardson appears increasingly isolated as damaging testimony continues. Chen posts an Instagram story from the courtroom. Justice being served today, accountability. The prosecutor approaches the bench. Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. Ms. Richardson embezzled $50 million, destroyed company morale, and showed complete disregard for fiduciary duty to shareholders and employees alike. Gallery members nod approvingly. Several take photos of Richardson, who continues writing notes with mechanical precision. Richardson's phone buzzes silently. Text message visible. Package delivered to courthouse steps. These touching stories we're hearing today, Walsh continues, represent the real-life stories of employees who trusted their CEO to act with integrity. Instead, they found someone who abused that trust for personal gain. Richardson stands up suddenly. The unexpected movement sends a ripple of surprise through the courtroom. Ms. Richardson, Brennan says sharply, you'll have your chance during— Your Honor, Richardson's voice cuts through the room, calm and clear. I respectfully request permission to present one piece of evidence. Complete silence. Even the court reporter stops typing. Brennan's eyebrows furrow. This is highly irregular. I understand, Your Honor. One piece of evidence that directly addresses the testimony we've heard today. The judge glances at the prosecutor, then back at Richardson. Something in her tone, her composure, gives him pause. You have 30 seconds to explain its relevance. Richardson reaches into her portfolio. Your Honor, I believe the court deserves to see the complete picture before rendering judgment. Brennan consults his notes, clearly uncomfortable with the departure from standard procedure. The gallery buzzes with anticipation. Reporters adjust their positions for better camera angles. Proceed, Ms. Richardson, but any grandstanding will result in contempt charges. Richardson approaches the bench with a single manila envelope. Her movement is measured, deliberate, like someone who's rehearsed this moment countless times. She hands the envelope to Brennan without speaking. The judge opens it, his expression shifting from irritation to confusion to something approaching alarm. He looks up at Richardson, then back at the documents, then up again. Bailiff, his voice wavers slightly. Please clear the gallery immediately. Chaos erupts. Reporters shout objections, demanding to stay. Industry executives crane their necks, trying to see the documents. Mills stops mid-whisper to her husband, confusion replacing her confident demeanor. Your Honor, Walsh protests. The prosecution objects to this. The gallery will be cleared, Brennan repeats, his voice stronger now. This is not a request. Security guards move through the rows. Phones disappear reluctantly into bags. The live Twitter feed cuts off mid-sentence. Jennifer Hayes speaks rapidly into her microphone as she's escorted out. Something unprecedented is happening inside. Thompson's confident smirk vanishes as he watches the commotion. Chen drops her phone, the screen cracking against the floor. Mills touches her pearl necklace nervously, her earlier tears now completely dry. Once the gallery empties, leaving only essential court personnel, Richardson remains standing near the bench. The silence feels heavy, pregnant with possibility. Ms. Richardson, Brennan's voice is carefully controlled. These documents, Are you prepared to authenticate their origin? Yes, Your Honor. Every document in that envelope has been verified by independent forensic accountants and federal investigators. Walsh jumps up. Your Honor, we were never provided copies of— Ms. Walsh, Richardson interrupts calmly, perhaps you should ask your witnesses if they'd like to revise their testimony before we proceed. Mills shifts in her seat. Thompson's hands begin trembling slightly. Chen stares at the envelope as if it contains explosives. Richardson opens a second folder she's been carrying. Your Honor, that envelope contains wire transfer records showing the $50 million in stolen funds were actually my personal emergency loan to save Richardson Industries from bankruptcy. The courtroom air seems to thicken. The loan was approved by our board of directors in a unanimous vote, a board that, 3 weeks later, voted to remove Ms. Mills, Mr. Thompson, and Ms. Chen for attempted embezzlement. Walsh frantically texts someone off screen. Thompson grips the witness stand railing. Mills' face has gone completely pale. Richardson continues, her voice steady as granite. Mills, Thompson, and Chen conspired to steal the emergency loan funds and frame me when their plan failed. Every accusation they've made today is documented projection of their own criminal behavior. She pulls out another document. FBI Financial Crimes Division forensic report completed yesterday. Every transaction traced, every forged document identified, every piece of perjured testimony documented and recorded. Brennan reviews the new documents, his expression growing increasingly grave. Ms. Richardson, these are serious allegations. Yes, Your Honor, which is why I've been working with federal investigators for the past 6 months to ensure we had ironclad evidence before proceeding. Mills suddenly speaks up, her voice barely above a whisper. This is impossible. We had everything planned perfectly. Richardson turns toward the witness area, her gaze sharp but controlled. Mills, you're sweating. Thompson, your hands are shaking. Chen, you're not recording this anymore, are you? Thompson stammers. This is some kind of setup. She's fabricating. Mr. Thompson, Richardson's voice cuts through his protest. Your Porsche Cayenne was purchased with Richardson Industries R&D funds. The wire transfer occurred 3 days after you authorized the fake vendor contract to Millennium Consulting, a company that exists only on paper. She turns to Mills. Janet, your daughter's private school tuition payments can be traced directly to our employee healthcare budget. 12 payments of $8,000 each. The bank records are quite clear. Mills starts crying again. But these tears look different. Desperate instead of performative. Richardson faces Chen. Sarah, your cooperation with the SEC investigation was motivated by a $200,000 payment from Blackstone Capital, the investment firm that planned to acquire Richardson Industries at a fraction of its actual value once our stock price collapsed. Chen's mouth opens and closes wordlessly. The beauty of your plan, Richardson continues, was its simplicity. Embezzle the funds, create fake documentation of my mismanagement, testify against me in federal court, and watch as Richardson Industries gets sold for pennies on the dollar to your actual employer. She checks her phone again. New message? Federal agents in position. Your Honor, there's one more thing the court should know before we proceed. Richardson's tone shifts slightly, carrying an edge of anticipation. But perhaps we should wait for the other parties to arrive. As if summoned by her words, the courtroom doors open. Federal agents in dark suits enter, badges visible, expressions professionally neutral but purposeful. Agent Maria Santos approaches the bench. Your Honor, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have arrest warrants for Janet Mills, Derek Thompson, and Sarah Chen on charges of conspiracy to commit wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and perjury in federal proceedings. The transformation is instantaneous. Mills collapses in her chair, sobbing openly. Thompson tries to stand, then sits back down heavily. Chen stares straight ahead, her face blank with shock. Walsh looks between the agents and her now former witnesses, understanding dawning. Your Honor, the prosecution requests an immediate recess to— Ms. Walsh, Agent Santos interrupts. You might want to review the documents Ms. Richardson provided. This hearing was conducted under federal surveillance as part of an ongoing investigation into corporate fraud and conspiracy. Richardson finally sits down, her composure never wavering. Your Honor, every word spoken in this courtroom today has been recorded by federal investigators. The defendant's full confessions are now part of the official record. Brennan sets down his gavel carefully. Ms. Richardson, am I to understand that you orchestrated this entire proceeding? No, Your Honor. I simply allowed the defendants to orchestrate their own downfall. They chose perjury. They chose to double down on their criminal conspiracy in a federal courtroom under oath. I chose to let justice take its course. Thompson suddenly bolts toward the exit. 2 federal agents intercept him before he reaches the door. Mr. Thompson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and interstate transportation of stolen property. Mills looks up through her tears. Amara, please. We thought you were in over your head. Richardson's expression doesn't change. No, Janet. You thought I was black and female, therefore easy to manipulate and destroy. That was your fatal miscalculation. The handcuffs click with metallic finality. Agent Santos moves to the center of the courtroom, her presence commanding immediate attention. She's 43, 20 years with the Bureau, and her expression suggests someone who's seen enough corporate criminals to recognize patterns. Your Honor, with the court's permission, I'd like to clarify the federal investigation that led to today's proceedings. Brennan nods, still processing the complete reversal of his courtroom. Please proceed, Agent Santos. 6 months ago, Ms. Richardson contacted the FBI Corporate Fraud Division with evidence of a conspiracy to embezzle funds from her company and frame her for the theft. Santos opens a thick file folder. What began as a straightforward embezzlement case evolved into something much more sophisticated. Richardson sits calmly, her hands folded. The woman who was being systematically destroyed minutes earlier now radiates quiet authority. The defendants didn't just steal money, Santos continues. They orchestrated an elaborate scheme to destroy Ms. Richardson's reputation, collapse her company's stock price, and enable a hostile takeover by Blackstone Capital Management. She produces a series of documents. Bank records show Mills received 12 payments totaling $96,000 from a Cayman Islands account controlled by Blackstone. Thompson received $200,000 for authorizing fake vendor contracts. Chen received $50,000 for her initial SEC complaint, plus another $100,000 for her testimony today. Mills has stopped crying, her face now blank with defeat. Thompson stares at his handcuffs as if they're foreign objects. Chen hasn't moved or spoken since the agents arrived. The complexity of their plan was impressive, Santos acknowledges. Create fake financial documents showing massive losses. Establish a paper trail suggesting Richardson was moving money offshore. Generate witness testimony painting her as incompetent and volatile. Then watch as federal prosecutors build a case using fabricated evidence. Walsh shifts uncomfortably. Agent Santos, are you suggesting the prosecution? No, Ms. Walsh. The prosecution acted in good faith based on fabricated evidence. The defendants counted on that integrity to make their frame-up work. Richardson speaks for the first time since the arrests began. Agent Santos, would you mind explaining to the court how Richardson Industries actually performed during the period in question? Certainly. Santos consults her notes. Richardson Industries reported revenue of $2.3 billion last fiscal year. Ms. Richardson's emergency loan of $50 million prevented 18,000 layoffs and saved the company from bankruptcy. Stock price increased 41% over the same period. She turns to face the defendants. The money Ms. Mills claimed was embezzled? It's sitting in a Wells Fargo escrow account, earning interest, fully documented and accounted for. Ms. Richardson's offshore transfers? Those were legitimate operational funds for the company's European expansion, approved by the board and audited by PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thompson finally speaks, his voice hoarse. She couldn't have known. We were careful. Every document, every transaction. Mr. Thompson, Richardson says quietly. "I've been CEO for 8 years. I know every financial system, every approval process, every vendor relationship in my company. When money started disappearing and fake documents started appearing, I didn't get angry. I got methodical." She opens her portfolio, revealing not just the boarding pass and business cards, but a sophisticated recording device. "This conversation is being recorded, as were all our interactions over the past 6 months. Connecticut is a one-party consent state, so everything you said to me privately is admissible evidence." Mills looks up sharply. "The staff meetings, the budget discussions, every conversation where you tried to manipulate financial data or create false narratives about my management style. All recorded, all transcribed, all analyzed by forensic accountants." Agent Santos produces another document. "Your Honor, we also discovered the defendants hacked into Ms. Richardson's email accounts and attempted to plant evidence of financial misconduct. Computer forensics traced the intrusion to Mr. Thompson's home network." Chen finally speaks, her voice mechanical. "How long have you known?" Richardson considers the question. "I suspected something was wrong 4 months into the fiscal year. I knew it was the 3 of you 6 weeks later. I had proof that would stand up in federal court 2 months ago." "Then why wait? Why put yourself through this trial?" "Because I needed your full confessions on the record. I needed the scope of your conspiracy documented under oath. And I needed to demonstrate that the financial crimes weren't opportunistic. They were part of a calculated plan to destroy a black woman's career and steal her company." Santos nods approvingly. "Ms. Richardson's cooperation allowed us to build a RICO case. This wasn't just embezzlement. It was an organized criminal conspiracy involving multiple participants across state lines." Brennan has been silent through these revelations, reviewing documents. Now he looks up, his expression troubled. "Ms. Richardson, I owe you an apology. The way this court treated you today—" "Your Honor," Richardson interrupts gently, "you acted on the evidence presented. The fault lies with those who fabricated that evidence." But her tone suggests she noticed every subtle bias, every interrupted objection, every mispronounced name. Santos continues her explanation. "The defendant's plan had 3 phases. Phase 1, embezzle funds while creating false documentation of Ms. Richardson's mismanagement. Phase 2, file SEC complaints and coordinate with federal prosecutors to build a criminal case. Phase 3, testify under oath to ensure conviction and complete destruction of her reputation." She pauses for effect. What they didn't anticipate was Ms. Richardson's strategic patience. Instead of fighting the charges immediately, she chose to work with federal investigators to expose the full extent of their criminal enterprise. Richardson stands, smoothing her blazer. "Your Honor, may I address the court?" "Please." "These 3 individuals didn't just steal money from my company. They weaponized the federal justice system against me. They counted on racial and gender bias to make their lies more believable. They assumed that a black woman CEO must be incompetent, must be corrupt, must be guilty of something." Her voice remains calm, but the words carry weight. "They weren't wrong about the bias, but they were wrong about me." Mills looks up, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Amara, I swear we never meant for it to go this far. Janet, you filed a federal complaint accusing me of embezzling $50 million. You testified under oath that I was incompetent and violent. You helped orchestrate a plan that would have sent me to prison for 20 years. Richardson's tone stays even. "Exactly how far did you mean for it to go?" Thompson tries one last time. "You have to understand, the company was struggling. We thought new leadership—" "Derek, the company was never struggling. You made it appear to struggle by stealing operating funds and creating fake loss reports. The only leadership problem Richardson Industries had was employees who were stealing from it." Agent Santos checks her watch. "Your Honor, we need to transport the defendants for booking and arraignment. Federal magistrate is waiting." "Of course." Brennan looks at Richardson. Ms. Richardson, all charges against you are hereby dismissed with prejudice. The court apologizes for the ordeal you've endured. Thank you, Your Honor. As the agents escort Mills, Thompson, and Chen toward the exit, Mills turns back one last time. How did you stay so calm? Through all of this, how did you not break? Richardson considers the question seriously. Because I knew the truth would come out eventually, and because anger would have played into your narrative about who I am. The courtroom doors close behind the defendants. For the first time in hours, Richardson allows herself a small smile. Agent Santos, what happens next? Federal grand jury indictments. RICO charges carry 20-year sentences. Wire fraud adds another 10 years per count. The IRS is investigating tax evasion charges that could add additional penalties. Richardson nods. And the company? Clean. Your emergency loan saved 18,000 jobs and prevented a major corporate collapse. The board has full documentation of your actions. Stock price should recover quickly once this story breaks properly. Walsh approaches hesitantly. Ms. Richardson, on behalf of the prosecutor's office, I apologize. We were completely deceived by their fabricated evidence. Ms. Walsh, you did your job with the information you had. The fault lies with those who provided false information, not with those who acted on it in good faith. But Richardson's phone is already buzzing with calls from reporters, board members, and federal officials. The real work is just beginning. Richardson's phone displays 17 missed calls in the past hour. Senator Williams, Treasury Secretary Chen, 3 board members, and multiple reporters. She scrolls through the messages as Agent Santos finishes her paperwork. Ms. Richardson, Santos says, there's one more thing you should know. This case is bigger than just your company. Richardson looks up from her phone. How much bigger? Blackstone Capital Management has been systematically targeting minority-owned corporations for hostile takeovers. Richardson Industries is the 5th company where we found evidence of insider manipulation to artificially depress stock prices. The courtroom feels smaller suddenly, the implications expanding beyond personal vindication into something systemic. We've been building a federal RICO case against Blackstone for 18 months. Your evidence was the missing piece we needed to prove coordinated criminal conspiracy across multiple corporations. Richardson sits back down, processing this information. How many other CEOs went through what I just experienced? 3 others. 2 were convicted on fabricated evidence before we understood the pattern. 1 committed suicide before trial. The weight of that statement settles over the room. Richardson's personal victory suddenly feels both larger and smaller. Larger in its implications for corporate justice, smaller in the context of other lives destroyed. The 2 who were convicted? Federal appeals court will overturn their sentences based on your case. They'll be exonerated within 60 days. Richardson's phone buzzes again. This time she answers. Senator Williams. Amara, I've been following the news coverage. Are you safe? I'm fine, Senator. Actually, I'm better than fine. The Federal Reserve Board meeting is tomorrow. Given everything that's happened, we should discuss your advisory position. Richardson glances at Agent Santos, who nods encouragingly. Senator, I'll be there. This experience has given me some insights that might be valuable for financial regulation policy. I'm sure it has. We'll talk tomorrow. She hangs up, then immediately calls her board chair. Marcus, it's Amara. Have you seen the news? Jesus, Amara, what the hell just happened? The FBI called 20 minutes ago saying you've been working undercover for 6 months? Not undercover. Cooperating. There's a difference. Richardson walks to the courtroom windows, looking out at the courthouse steps where reporters are gathering. Marcus, I need an emergency board meeting. Tonight. Of course. What do you need? Full financial disclosure of the investigation findings. Stock trading halt lifted. And I want Mills, Thompson, and Chen's severance packages revoked and converted to restitution payments. Done. Anything else? Richardson considers. Yes. I want to implement the Richardson Transparency Protocol immediately. Full financial disclosure, rotating audit firms, anonymous whistleblower protection, live-streamed board meetings. Amara, that's incredibly aggressive transparency. Way beyond SEC requirements. Marcus, we just proved that standard corporate governance isn't enough to prevent organized criminal conspiracy. We're going to lead the industry in ethical practices, not follow it. Agent Santos approaches with final paperwork. Ms. Richardson, the media is requesting a statement. How do you want to handle press coverage? Carefully. This isn't just about Richardson Industries anymore. Other companies, other executives need to understand what happened here. She reviews the documents Santos provides, detailed financial forensics showing the scope of the conspiracy. The numbers are staggering. Mills embezzled $12.3 million through 78 fake vendor contracts. Thompson transferred $8.7 million to Cayman Islands accounts using fabricated board resolutions. Chen received $350,000 for falsifying audit reports and SEC complaints. Agent Santos, when this goes to trial, I want to testify. Ms. Richardson, that's not necessary. We have enough evidence to... It's necessary. Other minority executives need to see that fighting back is possible, that organized criminal conspiracy can be defeated through legal channels. Her phone rings again. This time, it's her company's head of communications. Amara, Bloomberg, Forbes, and the Wall Street Journal are all requesting interviews. How do you want to respond? Schedule them. But I want to control the narrative. This isn't about personal vindication. It's about corporate accountability and systemic reform. Richardson gathers her belongings, the worn leather portfolio that held the evidence now seeming like a weapon that served its purpose. As she prepares to leave the courtroom, Walsh approaches one final time. Ms. Richardson, I have to ask, weren't you tempted to reveal everything earlier? To avoid the public humiliation of the trial? Richardson considers the question seriously. Ms. Walsh, if I had exposed them privately, they would have claimed I was retaliating against whistleblowers. If I had fought the charges immediately, they would have said I was using wealth and connections to avoid accountability. The only way to completely discredit their conspiracy was to let them commit perjury in federal court while federal agents recorded every word. She pauses at the courtroom door. Besides, I needed the full scope of their criminal enterprise documented. Not just the theft, but the systematic plan to destroy my reputation and steal my company. That required patience. And the emotional toll? Ms. Walsh, I've been the only black woman CEO in my industry for 8 years. I learned early that emotional reactions get weaponized against women like me. So I chose strategic thinking over emotional satisfaction. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarm. Richardson pauses at the top of the steps, the same steps where the package was delivered hours earlier, federal agents positioning themselves for the arrests that followed. Ms. Richardson, how does it feel to be vindicated? She considers her words carefully. This was never about vindication. It was about justice. Not just for me, but for other executives who've been targeted by similar criminal conspiracies. What's next for Richardson Industries? We're implementing the most aggressive corporate transparency standards in the industry. Full financial disclosure, independent oversight, protection for legitimate whistleblowers. We're going to prove that ethical corporate governance isn't just possible, it's profitable. Do you plan to sue your former employees? The federal government is handling criminal prosecution. Richardson Industries will pursue civil recovery of stolen funds through legal channels. But our focus is forward-looking, preventing future conspiracies, not just punishing past ones. A reporter from Bloomberg pushes forward. Ms. Richardson, sources say this case is part of a larger federal investigation into corporate fraud. Can you comment? Richardson glances toward Agent Santos, who nods slightly. I can confirm that Richardson Industries cooperated with federal investigators to expose a broader pattern of criminal conspiracy targeting minority-owned corporations. The Department of Justice will provide details as appropriate. What advice do you have for other executives facing similar situations? Document everything. Trust the legal system, but verify independently. And remember that patience and preparation defeat anger and impulse every time. She starts down the courthouse steps, then turns back to the reporters. One more thing. This case proves that individual integrity can overcome organized criminal conspiracy, But it shouldn't have to. Corporate governance, federal oversight, and industry standards need systemic reform to prevent future conspiracies. Her car waits at the curb, driver holding the door. As Richardson slides into the back seat, her phone shows 43 new messages. The board meeting is in 3 hours. The Federal Reserve meeting is tomorrow morning. Congressional testimony has been requested for next week. The work of rebuilding isn't finished. It's just beginning. But for the first time in 6 months, Amara Richardson allows herself to smile. Not with satisfaction, with anticipation. She has proven that strategic thinking defeats criminal conspiracy. Now she gets to prove that ethical corporate governance can transform an entire industry. The car pulls away from the courthouse, leaving behind the scene of her vindication and heading toward the much larger challenge of systemic reform. 2 months later, Richardson Industries stock hits an all-time high of $847 per share. The Richardson Transparency Protocol becomes the new industry standard for corporate governance. But the real changes run deeper than stock prices and policy initiatives. Janet Mills pleads guilty to 12 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. Federal Judge Patricia Morrison sentences her to 5 years in federal prison and orders full restitution of $12.3 million. Mills's husband files for divorce 3 days after sentencing. Her daughter transfers from private school to public education. Derek Thompson attempts to flee the country but is arrested at JFK Airport boarding a flight to Switzerland. Swiss authorities freeze his Zurich accounts containing $8.7 million in transferred Richardson Industries funds. He receives 8 years federal prison and deportation to face additional fraud charges in Switzerland. Sarah Chen negotiates a cooperation agreement, testifying against Blackstone Capital Management executives in exchange for a reduced sentence. 2 years federal prison, lifetime ban from securities industry, permanent restriction from corporate financial positions. Her detailed testimony exposes the systematic targeting of minority-owned corporations across 5 states. Judge Harold Brennan faces formal judicial conduct review for bias demonstrated during Richardson's trial. The Judicial Ethics Committee finds sufficient evidence of prejudicial behavior to warrant suspension. Brennan takes early retirement rather than face additional disciplinary action. Richardson Industries implements structural changes that reshape corporate accountability standards. All board meetings live stream to shareholders on the company website. Quarterly financial audits rotate between 4 independent firms, preventing long-term manipulation relationships. The Anonymous Whistleblower Protection app receives 127 reports in its first month, leading to discovery of 3 additional fraud attempts. The Richardson Corporate Accountability Act passes Congress with bipartisan support. Mandatory bias training for federal judges becomes law. Enhanced penalties for racially motivated fraud accusations include automatic federal hate crime investigation. The SEC creates a new corporate conspiracy division specifically to investigate organized fraud targeting minority-owned businesses. But the most significant change isn't legislative, it's cultural. Richardson's case becomes required study material at Harvard Business School, Wharton, and Stanford Graduate School of Business. The Richardson method enters corporate governance vocabulary, describing strategic patience in crisis management. Richardson establishes the Ethical Leadership Foundation with $50 million in personal funding. The foundation provides legal defense funds for minority executives facing fabricated charges and offers strategic consulting for corporations implementing transparency protocols. Her personal net worth increases $200 million as Richardson Industries stock soars on news of the company's ethical governance leadership. But Richardson redirects the windfall into the foundation and employee profit-sharing programs rather than personal wealth accumulation. The company expands hiring of minority executives by 300% over 18 months, not through affirmative action requirements, but through systematic elimination of the cultural biases that previously limited advancement opportunities. Revenue grows 28% annually as ethical governance practices attract both investors and top talent. Federal prosecutors use Richardson's case as the foundation for RICO charges against Blackstone Capital Management. 11 executives face federal conspiracy charges. The investment firm's assets are frozen pending investigation. Their systematic targeting of minority-owned corporations collapses under federal scrutiny. 3 other minority CEOs falsely convicted in similar conspiracies have their sentences overturned on federal appeal. Marcus Williams, CEO of Williams Construction, serves 18 months in federal prison before Richardson's case exposes the fabricated evidence used against him. Patricia Chen, CEO of Chen Technologies, attempts suicide before trial, but survives and is eventually exonerated. David Rodriguez, CEO of Rodriguez Manufacturing, loses his company to hostile takeover but recovers ownership through federal court order. Richardson mentors all 3 executives through the legal and emotional recovery process. The shared experience creates an informal network of minority business leaders committed to preventing future corporate conspiracies. Time magazine names Richardson to their 100 most influential people list. Forbes features her on their cover with the headline, "The CEO Who Changed Corporate America." Harvard Business Review publishes her essay, "Strategic Patience: How Emotional Intelligence Defeats Criminal Conspiracy." Congressional hearings on corporate accountability feature Richardson's testimony about systematic bias in business and legal systems. Her recommendations for federal oversight expansion become the foundation for new regulatory frameworks. Richardson Industries creates 4,000 new jobs in the 18 months following the trial. The company's ethical governance model attracts partnerships with major corporations seeking to improve their own accountability standards. The Federal Reserve Board Advisory Committee incorporates Richardson's insights into new financial regulation policies. Her experience with corporate conspiracy leads to enhanced oversight of investment firm practices and improved protection for minority-owned businesses. But Richardson's most important achievement isn't measured in stock prices, legislation, or media coverage. It's the phone calls she receives from minority executives facing similar challenges. The quiet consultations where she shares strategic advice. The knowledge that other business leaders now have a roadmap for defeating organized corporate conspiracy. She didn't just win her case. She changed the game entirely. 1 year later, Amara Richardson stands before 500 business students at Howard University's School of Business. The auditorium is packed, with overflow seating in adjacent rooms broadcasting her presentation live. "The question isn't whether you'll face bias in corporate America," she begins. "The question is whether you'll be prepared when that bias becomes criminal conspiracy." Her voice carries the quiet authority of someone who's transformed personal trauma into systemic change. The students lean forward, recognizing something authentic in her presence. 3 years ago, I thought corporate success meant proving I belonged in rooms where I was the only person who looked like me. I was wrong. Real success means changing those rooms entirely. Richardson clicks to her next slide, a photo of Mills, Thompson, and Chen in handcuffs. These individuals didn't just steal money. They weaponized the federal justice system against me because they assumed a black woman CEO must be guilty of something. They weren't wrong about the bias existing, but they were wrong about my response to it. She pauses, scanning the diverse faces in the audience. I chose strategic thinking over emotional reaction, documentation over confrontation, legal channels over public relations, and most importantly, I chose to change the system instead of just defending myself within it. The Richardson Transparency Protocol now operates in 47 major corporations across 12 industries. The Ethical Leadership Foundation has provided legal defense for 18 minority executives with a 100% success rate in exposing fraudulent charges. Richardson's company employs 23,000 people across 4 countries. Annual revenue exceeds $3.2 billion, but the numbers that matter most to her are different. Zero-tolerance harassment reports, 94% employee satisfaction rating, and industry-leading retention of minority executives. These touching stories we share today represent more than individual victories, Richardson tells the students. They're proof that Black stories matter in reshaping corporate America. When we document our experiences, when we choose intelligence over anger, when we build systems instead of just fighting battles. That's how real-life stories become lasting change. A student raises her hand. Ms. Richardson, what if we don't have your resources? What if we can't fight back the way you did? Richardson's expression softens. Every person in this room has the same resources I used: patience, documentation, and strategic thinking. I didn't win because I was wealthy or connected. I won because I chose to be methodical instead of reactive. Her phone buzzes with a text from Agent Santos. Blackstone executives sentenced today. 15-20 years federal prison. Full restitution ordered. Richardson smiles, not with satisfaction but with quiet recognition that justice, though slow, remains possible. Your generation gets to inherit the systems we've built, she concludes. But more importantly, you get to improve them. Document everything. Trust the process, but verify independently. And remember, individual integrity can defeat organized conspiracy, but systemic change prevents future conspiracies from forming. The applause is sustained, respectful, carrying the weight of understanding rather than mere appreciation. What injustices have you witnessed in your workplace? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be the catalyst someone else needs to take action. If this story inspired you, please share it with someone who needs to see how intelligence and preparation can defeat even the most organized prejudice. Subscribe for more real-life stories that prove justice isn't just possible. It's inevitable when good people refuse to stay silent. Remember, Amara Richardson didn't just win her case. She changed the game entirely. And that's the difference between revenge and revolution.